I needed more display space in my store, so today I'm building a ladder-style shelf from ordinary lumber. The plan looks simple enough. Rip some 2x4s, build 3 shelves at the supports, paint it, and put it in the store. Of course, simple projects have a way of creating their own problems. I made a few mistakes, had to take the whole thing apart, and even installed one shelf the wrong direction. But in the end, this turned into a solid, useful display shelf, and I'll show you the whole process. When I was looking for something, I don't even remember what online, I ran across this set of plans. It gives a good materials list, a cutting list. I picked up the lumber I'll need at my local Home Depot last night. According to the cutting list, for the legs, I'll need two 40-inch long, 2.5 wide by 1.5 inch thick pieces. A 2x4 is already 1.5 inches thick, so that dimension's fine, but I'll have to rip them to 2.5 inches wide and cross-cut these two down to 40 inches long. I'll also need 2 diagonal braces for the front at 42 inches long with a 15-degree miter on each end. I'll do the angled cuts on my miter saw, the cross cuts on my radial arm saw, and the rip cuts on the table saw. I get to use lots of tools today. I could just cut one side to rip these to width, but that would leave one side with a straight edge and another with a rounded edge. I wouldn't like that look, so I'm going to rip just enough off one side to square it off. I'll do that with all 4 boards. Then I'll set the rip fence for 2.5 inches and make the cut on the second side of all the boards. I usually cut with the blade guard in place, so I'll plead guilty to that safety violation. I did, however, use a splitter, which you can see is in place before it gets buried in the 2x4. I set the blade height so it's only peeking out over the top of the board. I fed it in slowly while standing off to the side, and once the far end was on the table, I picked up the push stick and used it for the remainder of the cut. I waited for the blade to stop spinning before I removed the waste and the board I just cut. I set it aside, ripped the first side of the rest of the 2x4s, and then set the fence to make the rip cut to final width. I also machined some more 2x4s to make the frames for the 3 shelves. Once again, I made the rip cuts on my table saw and the cross cuts on my radial arm saw, so there was no need to show all that prep. The 2x4s are already the specified thickness, but I want to paint the shelf unit, and it makes more sense to run them through the thickness planer than to spend buku time sanding them. The planer will remove the rough spots on the wood, and the tiny difference in final thickness won't cause any loss of strength. I usually flip boards after they come through the planer so that I know the side facing up needs to be run through on the next pass. I'm going to use the table saw for the frame assembly since it's flat, level, and large enough. I already have several projects in varying stages of completion on my workbench. The designer recommends using glue and screws for this setup, and I thought, why not? Sometimes the belt and suspenders are called for. If glue is strong, glue plus screws is even stronger. I dropped the blade below the table and I moved the fence over and locked it in place. That gave me a strong base plus an upright surface to push against. I applied some yellow glue to the end of the cross-piece and pressed it into place against the long side of the frame. I've been using white glue for a long time, but the last time I was at my local Menards store, I bought a gallon of the yellow glue, plus a small container for easier application. The yellow glue has a faster setup time than the white glue, and I have some projects where that will be helpful. I know from experience not to use screws without drilling a pilot hole first, so that's what I'm doing. I would have used a second drill driver to make the pilot holes, but its battery charge was too low for it to be usable. I have 2 new fully charged batteries for my DeWalt drill, so I'll have to go the slow route of drilling the pilot holes, then removing the drill bit and switching to a Phillips bit to drive the screws. I'm using 2.5-inch screws, and driving them takes a good battery and lots of torque. Even though I'd already drilled pilot holes, when I tried to drive the screws in horizontally, the process was not working very well. Once again, 4 years of college and 7 years of graduate school did not help me much here. Then another part of my brain took over, and I turned the board so I could put the screws in vertically instead. This way, instead of fighting gravity, it was helping me. My old high school physics teacher would perhaps be proud, but my high school woodshop teacher would likely be left wondering if any of his students remembered anything he taught. After I built the frames, the next task was to cut the strips that will form the tops of each step. This was designed as a bathroom shelf, and there were spaces between the strips, but I'll be using this to display products in my retail store, and these gaps might make it difficult to show some products. I first thought about cutting solid pieces of 4/4 poplar for each shelf, but I rejected that idea for two reasons. First, I didn't have enough white poplar on hand. Second, I purchased these 1x3 strips of poplar for this project, and I had no idea how I'd use them up in other projects. The strips for the middle and bottom shelf are 20 inches long, and those for the top are 24 inches. They are longer because the top shelf overhangs the side braces. I kept them all the length on my radial arm saw. Now I can attach the strips to the top of each shelf. Rather than glue and screws, I wanted the fasteners to be less noticeable, so I'm using glue plus my pneumatic nail gun. I don't even have any nails on hand in my shop anymore because the nailer is faster and easier. I attached the strips so they were flush with the back of the frame, leaving an overhang on the sides and the front. I wanted to machine a round over on the edges of each shelf because cut edges can be rather sharp, and I don't want a customer cutting themselves or getting a splinter on a shelf's edge. I have my full-size router mounted in the router table, but I think the trim router should work well for this task. I like the convenience of the trim router for jobs like this. I purchased this last Christmas along with the charger and battery as a package deal, and I reviewed the tool not long after that. I'll leave a link to the review video in the description. I routed a small section, checked to make sure I liked the depth of the cut, and then continued along the entire perimeter. I did the same on the middle and bottom shelves. It's time to assemble everything. I decided that it made the most sense to set the shelves on end on the shop floor, attach the back and front braces on one side, and then flip it over to attach the braces on the other side. The plans once again called for 2.5-inch long screws, and there's no way in the world I would try to drive these without pilot holes. I have one drill set up with a 1/8 bit for the pilot holes, and then I'll come back and drive the screws with my heavier DeWalt drill driver. The plans show to attach the bottom shelf 4 inches off the floor, so I measured that distance, drilled a pilot hole, and then drove a 2.5-inch screw through the upright and into the shelf's frame. I added the second screw before moving on to the middle shelf because otherwise the shelf would have been able to flop around while I was making the rest of the connections. The bottom of the middle shelf is 20.5 inches from the floor, and I attached it in the same manner as the bottom shelf. I didn't have to do any measuring for the top shelf because the top of the side post met the shelf flush against the overlapping edge. Thankfully, there was nothing new to see here because that operation was out of the camera range. Sometimes I get caught up in what I'm doing and I forget to see if the camera needs to be moved. Now I can attach the angled support. The plan called for 15-degree bevels at the top and bottom, parallel to each other, and I made those on my radial arm saw when I was cutting these to length. The top of the support butts against the bottom of the top shelf, and the bottom of the support gets screwed to the bottom shelf. The vertical edge of the support and the horizontal edge of the shelf meet and are fastened with the usual 2.5-inch screws. After completing all of these steps, I flipped the ladder over to complete the second side in the same manner as the first. While doing the flip, I noticed one thing. This shelf is already getting heavy. I finished attaching the upright supports on the second side, and I lifted the ladder shelf into its working position. Now comes the important part of the project. How does it look? Does it meet my expectations? How will it look in the store? What color should I paint it? It looks good, not perfect, because like any craftsman, I'm aware of every tiny defect. Yes, it turned out pretty much as I expected. I think it will look good in the store, and I have enough paint left from a shelf I built for the toys section a few months back. But as I moved the ladder around a bit, one more question came to mind. I can't possibly get this up the basement steps by myself. Who can I get to help me? I'll have to give some thought to this last question. After some careful cogitation, I decided that the best way to proceed was to disassemble the shelf. I had already painted it, but if I took it apart, I could paint the areas that were inaccessible when I painted the assembled shelf. Plus, I didn't paint all the way to the bottom of the legs because I didn't have a drop cloth or newspaper handy to cover the floor to allow me to paint that far down. So I'll take this apart, paint any missed areas, and do any touch-up that may be necessary. I can then let the paint dry overnight, carry the pieces up the stairs one or two at a time, load them into my car, and take them to my store for reassembly. I also noticed that the middle shelf was not level from front to back, so I can ensure all the shelves are level when I assemble the unit again. Since I had the unit apart, it was easy to paint the underside edges of the frames for each shelf the second time around. I didn't paint the rest of the undersides because unless you got down on your hands and knees to check out those areas, the lack of paint wouldn't be noticeable. I screwed the uprights to the top shelf to keep it in place, measured for the bottom shelf distance from the ground, and put one screw in each side to keep it in place. But I didn't notice until later that I'd installed the bottom shelf oriented in the wrong direction. It's not square, it's a rectangle with almost equal sides. Sometimes I get caught up in the moment and make dumb mistakes like this. It wasn't until I had the back leg attached to the top and middle shelves that I noticed what I'd done. Fortunately, the error was easily corrected. So I disconnected the bottom shelf, turned it 90 degrees, and now the shelves and supports were all aligned. I made all the connections with 2.5-inch wood screws, possibly held my breath in anticipation of discovering another problem, and finally placed the ladder in its intended upright position. Here's the finished ladder shelf, finally assembled and in the store. It's not perfect. I can see the little flaws because I built it, but it's sturdy, it gives me more display space, and it should work well for showing smaller products without taking up too much floor space. This project was also a good reminder that woodworking is not always a straight line from plan to finished piece. Sometimes you change the design, take things apart, fix mistakes, repaint, and keep going. If you enjoy practical woodworking projects like this, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you would have done differently. Would you have built the shelves with gaps like the original plan, or made them solid like I did for product display? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.